you led the whole open source initiatives at Facebook. You had this really instructive diagram at the beginning of the course, which you showed large companies and like where they're active. And I think Facebook is one of the top, like Google, Hugging Face. There's like a list of 10 or 15. I'm curious, why do these companies invest so much in building these tools, obviously for themselves, but also just making it open to everyone? Like you, I think, led a lot of the strategy. Can you talk about why Facebook cared so much about this?
Right. Okay, well, so in the very kind of early days, there was a bunch of open source. This is before my time even. There was a bunch of open source happening at Facebook. Some of the very early contributions were being shared. And I think at that time it was just a sense of reciprocity, or reciprocity, I should say, which is that the site was originally built on PHP, MySQL, Apache, Linux, so that classic kind of LAMP stack, that's what Zuck was building in his dormitory. And so there was this feeling like that the whole company was kind of beholden, or was standing on the shoulders of those giants, I should say, and that giving back improvements to Memcache or whatever was going to be a worthy thing to do. But then I would say as the program matured, we got a little bit more thoughtful about why we should open source and why we shouldn't open source given projects, because it became very easy for teams just to say, hey, we built a cool thing and we'd like the world to see it, and they just throw it over the wall, they upload it onto GitHub, and then they forget all about it, and then it just sits there and it goes stale, and actually it ends up being worse than not having done it at all, because now people begin to resent the fact that you're not maintaining it and you've got some internal fork that you've carried on using. And unfortunately, Facebook had done that a lot and had got a bad reputation for doing that. And so what we really tried to do was be very thoughtful about what projects were open sourced. And the main rule or heuristic that we used was, is this project going to continue to be used in production? Rather than some intern project that the guy or girl just threw over the wall, like this is actually something that's going to continue to make Facebook.com work, because then you have an implicit warranty that it's going to continue to be maintained. And we built a bunch of synchronization tooling so that, you know, worked on the internal version and it would get synchronized out to GitHub and vice versa, so you never had that kind of forking issue. And then as we did this, we began to realize that there were many more benefits than just kind of giving back to the community. And again, another naive thought is, oh great, we've got 1,000 hackers out in the open source world who are now writing our code for us. It's like, no, they're not really necessarily making business valuable choices for you. You've still got to do a bunch of the work. But the value that we did get back to the company was around stuff like just the overall engineering brand of Facebook. Previously people didn't really know what Facebook engineering was about, didn't kind of know the problems that were being solved, and all of a sudden you throw the doors open, you say, okay, we built React, and everyone's like, wow, that's weird, why do you do it like that? And you're like, because we have these problems, okay, because we're operating at this scale, and these systems are this large and this website is this complicated that we have to have something that's like a reactive function of state. And everyone's like, oh, interesting. And same with the data infrastructure. Why did you release this big data infrastructure? Like, no one ever needs to do this. Like, yeah, we needed to do this. This was the problem we had, and this is how we solved it. And because of the scale that Facebook is operating at, you're maybe a step ahead of many other companies, and it's like, these are the problems you're going to have in a year, or these are the problems you're going to have in 2 years' time. We just got there first, and we thought we'd share the solutions with you.
Right.
And then, a year or two later, people go, oh, yeah, React, now it makes sense. Got it. Okay. Thanks very much. So yeah, that was a big boost to the kind of the innovation narrative and the engineering brand, which of course means that people out in the community see the code that the company's writing. And they're like, wow, people writing this code are pretty smart. I would quite like to work with people like this. And you now begin to realize the caliber of the people that are working at these companies, obviously not just Facebook, but other large tech companies. It's a great kind of demonstration of what life is like inside a large company. And so, yeah, look, the ultimate success for this is the recruiting that you get from it, because now you've got a glimpse into what life is like there. People are contributing, and they're like, oh yeah, maybe I could work with these people. We got to the point, actually, at Facebook where when we knew we were going to open source a new thing, we would let the recruiting team know ahead of time. Right. And we're like, we're going to drop this next week, and, fingers crossed it's going to make it onto Hacker News. And that's going to be a good opportunity for you to reach out to maybe some of your recruiting leads and say, hey, look, go check out this project and see what you think. And that kind of helped the whole gyroscope, if you like, or the virtuous circle of getting people interested in working at the company. And that ended up being very successful for us.
That's really smart. I'm curious, at the time that you led the team for many years, so what would the metric be to measure success? Like, you open source a project on day one, at month number 6 or year number 1, a little bit down the road, how would you figure out if it's having the desired impact?
Right, so for the projects themselves, there were a bunch of metrics we tracked. There's a presentation somewhere on YouTube where I kind of run through them, which I'll try and find the link for. But Obviously, it's things like stars, which are a good indication of kind of, it's fairly superficial, but at least people are paying attention to this, or it caught their attention, caught their interest. Then obviously we look at the number of issues. Forks is a particularly good one. Forks is an indication that people have actually taken it and they're making changes to it, either for themselves or because they're planning to commit back. Pull requests are obviously a sign that people are actually making contributions back again. But a lot of what I was doing was trying to hold the internal teams that were open sourcing these projects accountable for their project. Because if they've put something out and then they forget about it, then that, like I said, it reflects badly on the company. So how do I hold them accountable? And so we would look at things like the latency of how long issues took to get triaged, or how long it took for pull requests to get merged when they were from external contributors, because there's nothing worse than putting up a pull request to a big project and then, not hearing from the company for months. You end up, again, resenting that. So we would really look at some of those latencies, rate of closure, and those kinds of things. But that was kind of all fairly tactical. That was on a team level basis. As the program as a whole matured, we were really trying to think about this recruiting angle, or we're affecting the overall narrative about the company out in the industry. And one of the most interesting things we did was we would run a survey on open source with the interns, or in fact any new joiner that was joining the company. So you may have talked about this before, but there's a concept of a boot camp at Facebook. For the first 6 weeks, new engineers coming in just spend 6 weeks doing interesting projects and working around with Codebase. And we would interview them and we would say, how aware were you of the open source project or the open source program as a whole? How much did that influence your decision to join the company? And how much did the skills that you gained from that help once you had joined the company? And those are all really interesting. So firstly, have we made a difference in the outside world? And secondly, is it actually positively affecting your decision to join the company? And that started trending positively. It was like, this is awesome, right? People are looking at the different tech companies they could join, and they've chosen Facebook because we have a healthy open source project. That's amazing. But the one that was really interesting was that final one. It's like, how much have the skills you learned outside with our projects helped you once you got here? Because if you've been working on React for a year outside the company and then you join Facebook, you're going to be productive very quickly, rather than if this had been a proprietary internal front-end system that no one had ever seen before until they joined, it would take them weeks, if not months, to get up to speed on it. And so if you've got a rock star engineer that's just joined the company and they can be effective on day 2 instead of effective on month 2, it's like you've just earned 2 months of a brilliant engineer's time. And so that's super valuable. And that's like in real terms, that's a big deal. So those were the kinds of things we would do, track those over time. And I guess that narrative continues now with what the company is doing after I left, with a lot of the AI and ML projects. So things like Llama, think how much of a kind of an aura that gives to the AI and the ML teams at Meta. If you can see this thing out there and wow, this is pretty impressive, and I'm going to get to work on that. So
and I think the magical thing about that, I think the way you structure that makes a ton of sense to me. I didn't know there was that much depth behind it. But even like I joined in 2017, I didn't really do too much open source at Facebook. But the fact that I knew that there were really amazing engineers there at Facebook, and the brand was so strong because of how the open source program, I think it's kind of like the tide that lifts all boats. Yep. And so like even if you're not even working on anything related to open source, it still is something you start to care about. And so I think it's a really good way of talking about the dollar value of reduced ramp up time and just being able to win over a really good candidate who you might not be able to if you don't have that open source culture.
Right. And that candidate now knows that their work when they're inside the company may also still have a chance to be visible outside.
Yeah, totally.
If you've built your entire career and reputation in the open source world, you don't want to disappear inside a big tech company and never be seen again, right? You want to be able to still have your commits appearing so people can see that you're still active.